Shalom. This week's Sedra says Lecha. The Mishnah and Pirkei Avos discuss God's love for Avraham. In a show of love, God tested Avraham 10 times, as was recorded in the Mishnah. With 10 tests was Avraham, our father, tested, and he stood steadfast in them all. The tests were given to Avraham to show how great Hashem's love for Avraham was. In his commentary to this Mishnah, Rabbeinu Yonah explained that the test that God challenged Avraham with demonstrated God's love for Avraham by making Avraham's awe of God and strength of character known to everyone. In our Sedra, we find a debate about one of the tests, and even find a debate about whether Avraham passed or failed one of the tests. We find recorded in our Sedra there was a famine in the land. This was Canaan at the time, and Avraham went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. Rashi gave some background to this episode, writing, God made the famine only in the land that Avraham lived. This famine was brought to test Avraham, whether he would take exception to God's commands. God had commanded Avraham to go to the land of Canaan, and now forced him to leave it because of famine. According to Rashi, the test was whether Avraham would second-guess God's commands. Similarly, the Radak wrote, the famine was one of the 10 trials that Avraham was subjected to by God. He successfully mastered all of them. He never second-guessed God. Avraham could have thought, wait a minute, yesterday God said, all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. And today God sends a famine so harsh in the land that I live in that I have to leave it to go to a different place. Instead of second-guessing God, Avraham accepted the famine with love. The Radak turned the Mishnah on its head. He taught that the test demonstrated Avraham's love of God, not God's love of Avraham. Ramban understood this episode much differently. Instead of understanding this episode as a test that Avraham passed, he understood it as a sin that Avraham failed. He wrote that Avraham's fleeing from Canaan due to the famine was a sin. Avraham had been commanded earlier to move to the land. Leaving the land he had been commanded to move to due to the famine was a transgression that he committed. God would have saved Avraham from dying even in a famine. Because of this sin, it was decreed that Avraham's descendants would be in exile in Egypt under the hand of Pharaoh. The Ramban understood that Avraham had failed the test of the famine, but his disagreement with Rashi and the Radak extends to another subject as well. According to Rashi and Radak, the test was whether Avraham would second-guess God. To pass or fail the test, Avraham could have stayed or left to Egypt. The assessment was how Avraham thought of God's command. According to the Ramban, the important factor was whether Avraham would demonstrate his trust in God by staying in Canaan through a challenging time. Rashi and Radak's opinion about Avraham demonstrating his love for God by not second-guessing Hashem and not focusing on Avraham's actions teaches us a very important lesson about relationships. All too often, we focus on our friend and family's actions and not on their motivations and intentions. We judge too quickly without considering what they were thinking or trying to accomplish. We need to develop greater patience with our family and friends and give them the benefit of the doubt. When they do something to upset us and their actions seem to reflect insensitivity, we must focus on their intentions and assume that they were for the best. It's an important lesson from this week's Sedra. Shabbat Shalom.